to INS, the International News Service, your source for the most important weird news from across the globe. With news analyst Kevin Harrison, actor, comedian, and musician Mike Wiebe, and professional commentator Brian Camp. INS, the news you need.
Speaking of crazy faces, and you guys know way more about movies than I do, as you have no doubt, as you've let me know many times. But I told you I watched that Public Enemy movie.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah,
it's fucking great.
Yeah.
And he's great. Yeah, I kind of thought he was going to be much like Edward G. Robinson. I thought was going to be kind of a farce, kind of a joke.
What's wrong with Edward G. Robinson? He's a great actor.
I was introduced to both of them through Bugs Bunny cartoons, so they both seem like something that should be made fun of. And it turns out they're very talented at what they do.
Yeah.
But the face he gets when he's walking into the place to go avenge his buddy's death.
Damn, spoiler alert.
Well, it's 1931. And like he's always like the punch he gives everybody that people just start to get real annoyed by. It's fucking good.
Yeah, it is. He's
a real Yankee Doodle Dandy.
A real Yankee Doodle Dandy. It is weird that, like those dudes would play so many, like build a career around being tough guys, and then also have a movie where they're like, That
with a little soft shoe. That's
yeah.
Maybe that's what Phoenix down a sad road was his.
That's what he did. He was a dancer before he became known for all the gangster roles.
Well, yeah, no one took him seriously in the gangster roles, and so he lives his life to prove them all wrong. 23 Skidoo. Oh man, but the end of it, man, it's just it was. I was surprised by the end of it. It was good.
Public Enema.
Mm-hmm. I had no idea that's what it was going to be, but it was.
It shows him getting an enema, a wine enema, fucks him up real bad.
They had a concrete over the park where they did it.
Mm-hmm. I do have coming up. I do have another entry into this month's historical Know Your Podcast Better. We are going to get into the Glen Larsonaissance.
Ooh.
That sounds fantastic.
The works of Glen Larson.
Who doesn't like the Far Side?
Well, no, again, different guy.
Glad we can just
altogether.
have one joke we can recycle every week.
Well,
have you just started listening, Kevin?
Yeah, that's kind of...
Well, as we interface, too.
Coming up, dear listeners who want to hear about moderately performing 80s sci-fi network TV shows, get ready for part 2 of the Glen Larsonaissance.
I want to let the listener know, since we're talking about this, we're also adding an arts and culture corner. And some weeks it may be an interview. Other weeks it may be a story, or we might have watched some kind of strange film together and we have a discussion on that. This week it'll be a story.
Some weeks we might have gone to a brothel and discuss the fine art of sensuality.
Professional lovemaking. Professional whoopee.
It's probably not. It's not going to happen.
It might.
You don't know.
Okay. We could go to a psychic fair again.
We can travel. Nature's brothel.
My psychic powers say that is not happening.
Damn.
A psychic brothel,
wow.
Yeah.
As we move forward with all this, I mean, I would hate for us to forget the good people that we have not mentioned in quite a while who have been such an important part of our earlier success. The good people of Ireland.
Are you talking about our Patreons?
The good people of Ireland, yes. The many Patreons, the good people of Ireland, the good people of the Panamaniacs, the recent Panamanians.
We're blowing up in Panama. Panama loves us. Yeah, we did more downloads than any other country and almost any other state last month. And this month, rivaling just about every state and neck and neck with Canada right now.
Panama, ho, 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 ho. Panama.
1/3 of our stories are canal related, so it makes sense.
That is true.
That's why we're big in Pennsylvania.
You know who has a lot of canals, Brian? The state of Ohio.
They don't
And
have
much of I'm not
They're
making this
landlocked.
not making no, there's Lake Erie's right there.
But I thought Erie was in Pennsylvania.
Much of my childhood was spent being like I was awoken at like 6:30 on a Saturday morning to go, hey, come on, we're not going to watch cartoons today. We're going to go look at a canal. It's 3 hours away. Get in the car.
Where were you going, fishing or just canal gazing?
Just canal gazing. One time, we got to be on a boat that was pulled by horses for 1 mile, and then they turned the boat around, and it was pulled by horses the other way for 1 mile, and that was a canal journey I made.
That's the Ohio equivalent of a Texas train ride at the zoo. That's
Yeah, we didn't go to the zoo.
or
We just rode in a canal.
You probably saw some alligators and stuff out there in that Ohio swamp.
No, they don't have alligators in Ohio.
I mean crocodiles. That's right.
No, crocodiles. None of that.
Did you see any frogs wearing a conical hat, waving a staff or scepter or spear or something that glowed at the end, and the hat had stars and moons on it, and maybe he was wearing a robe and looked very wizened.
Yes,
Maybe gave the eye and then just disappeared.
Possibly the wand had glintstone on it.
I am sworn to secrecy, Brian.
Which in the Elden Ring verse,
oh no,
is very magical, and I spell magic with a K.
The only way to spell it.
Well, unless you're talking about illusions.
Yeah, this is the real deal.
Magick. The way a guy who writes comic books would spell it.
Or maybe someone who's busily translating the ancient speech of the walking frog.
Now, you know what? When we this has come up a lot, and I think we may need to come back to the Loveland frog.
Of course.
Is there any chance that the Loveland frog could be where the basis of the slods in Dungeons and Dragons come from?
What is a slod?
They're like little fucking dimensional traveling frog people. Some are red, some are blue. So they're different colors. Their color designates some of their powers.
What was the name of the smart Sleestack? Because maybe that's what the Loveland frog is compared to the slods. Enoch. That's right. Maybe that's what the Loveland frog is just trying to get back to his own time, which is
possibly
thousands of years into the future.
It's very, very possible.
In the future, in thousands of years,
that's what Enoch
the
was.
Earth is going to be populated by frogs.
They've managed to persist since the early days when we crawled out of the primordial ooze.
Primordial ooze is just one of those phrases, Mike. You throw that down.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, frogs are like the oldest living, you know, animal, and they're the one animal that the Bible says you cannot kill.
What? I don't think that's right at all.
That's why they fall from the heavens. They don't ever. They don't die when they hit the ground. You can drop a frog from a 100-story building and it will not die. I challenge anyone to prove me wrong.
We at the INS don't encourage anyone to do that.
You know, you shouldn't.
Ask that you don't.
Yeah, you shouldn't. Well, you shouldn't get. Honestly, you shouldn't even get on top of a 100-story building because that's very dangerous. The wind gusts alone.
Are there any 100-story buildings?
Yeah, the Empire State Building. That is crazy because it killed King Kong, but it would not kill a frog. It was Beauty the Beast, but it was nothing that killed the frog.
If King Kong had landed on a frog, he wouldn't have died.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why you always see like parachuters, they have their main chute, their reserve chute, and they always have a frog in the bib with those little arms hanging out.
That's not true.
That way, if none of their chute's open, they know to land right on their chest because the frog will save them.
The frog will absorb the impact.
I'll say this: that's as real as King Kong is.
Well, you just verified it then. I've seen the movie King Kong, so it's pretty real to me.
Real.
Which one?
I've seen two of them.
Jeff Bridges has never been in a finer movie.
I'm surprised you didn't say Beau Bridges.
He was in it too. He was in the monkey suit.
Fay Wray.
Oh, Fay Wray.
Oh, Fay Wray.
She in that one. I mean, that movie's so old you can't fake that.
No. Yeah, they didn't have movie magic.
They didn't
back
have
then.
technology. They didn't have movie magic back then.
They didn't have stop motion animation.
With the CK.
I don't know what that is, but they didn't have it, and they would just have to like take out a camera and just push play, and they crank it. They had to hand crank it.
It wasn't until 1974 that the Loveland Frog came back from the future and gave us stop motion animation.
Gotta get back.
So until the first sighting of the Loveland Frog, there was no anime. That's where movie magic comes from, and that's how we know the Loveland Frog is real. Anything after that, we don't know for sure because it could be animation or, as Micah said, movie magic.
Movie magic.
Moving magic. That's where it comes from.
Movie magic.
Oh.
You know, the first time that people saw a movie, there was a train coming at them, and they freaked the fuck out, and a bunch of them shit their pants.
That was the great train robbery.
There is the great. It was called the Great Bowel Evacuation, and so the early days of theaters, they started. They used to have like a hole in the seat, and they would make you strip down and just sit there because there's going to be so much fecal and urine would just evacuate from your bowels because you'd be so scared, like I'm trying to get hit by a fucking train. And that's how the early days of the kinetoscope.
Do you think silent movies was just trains driving at the camera?
Mostly. I mean, sometimes it was horses.
Good ones. Yeah.
Sometimes it was somebody throwing a baseball.
A little kid with a paddle ball game.
A little kid with a paddle.
So you guys ready to get started here?
With the news?
Does a mind flayer have facial tentacles?
Oh, man. Anytime I hear about a mind flayer, I get in a good mood, Mike. It's going to be a good one.
Yep.
You're in for a treat, international listeners.
In for a treat. And stick around to the end because we have a new...
Two new segments.
2 new segments. And one of them is Mike Wiebe's continuing story on the very pertinent and now Glen Larsonaissance.
That's right. We all went to radio school, and we are teasing future parts,
talking in the Queen's English.
She just had a jubilee. You're welcome, Britain.
Oh, she had a jubilee?
Yeah, Boy Scouts have a jubilee too.
Jamboree.
Is it a jamboree or I thought they had a diamond jubilee.
Wait, no, that's...
Are you sure?
Jamboree. Yeah, because Boy Scouts, they let the Eagle Scouts, they get to get up. They're called Eagle Scouts because they teach you how to play songs by the Eagles. Oh. So in the jamboree, they have a whole band of the Eagle Scouts, and they get up there and they living it up at the Hotel California. Such a lovely place, such a lovely face. We're going down to the Hotel
Welcome
California.
To the International News Service. We're your hosts. I'm Kevin Harrison, along with...
I am Brian Camp.
I'm Mike Wiebe. Mark Ryan's no longer here. He's out in the field. And by field, I mean like he's out in IRL. He's not in the studio where we are. He's out tracking down late-breaking news. He may come in. We'll see. But as for tonight, we are your news team.
Always chasing down a story is Mark Ryan. He could be in Michigan.
He may break in with breaking news.
He could be in El Salvador. He could be in Tierra del Fuego. He could be in
Morocco. Yeah, he's probably in those places.
He could be in Jakarta or Djibouti, or he could be in Qatar.
Djibouti?
Djibouti. Yeah. It's a city on the Ivory Coast.
Okay,
our country.
I think it's a country.
I don't think that's real.
No, it's real.
It's real.
Made up.
It is definitely in the Venn diagram right next to Titicaca in names of places.
Yeah,
that's in
names.
Peru.
Yeah. And Walla Walla. Yeah, it's a lake.
Walla Walla, Washington.
And Djibouti is actually in Eastern Africa, like on the Horn. It's not on Western Africa, which is the Ivory Coast.
Well, I apologize for my American geography, international listeners.
Way to go to public school, Brian.
I'm a product of our education system. Well, I knew it was a continent. That's pretty good.
Djibouti is not a continent.
I think that puts me in the top 10%. Africa's a continent.
Incontinent is what the viewers of the first movie were.
Oh, no.
And that's what you call a callback.
So our first story comes to us from Gizmodo.
Oh, that's
Gizmodo. Tech blog.
Tech blog Gizmodo.
Named after the original Gremlin.
That's probably how they named it.
In the film, the 1982 film Gremlins.
1982?
I mean 84.
Yeah, 84.
Let's. We've got a story.
All right. Yes. We'll get to that later.
Yes.
Video game slang is so pervasive in online communities that it can often seem like another language. So it should come as little surprise that France's Ministry of Culture announced earlier this month that it will ban several popular gaming terms for not being French enough. Terms that are on the chopping block include pro gamer, streamer, esports, and cloud gaming. These will instead be replaced with French equivalents. For example, streamer will now be joueur and amateur en direct, which is much easier to say than streamer and literally translates to live player host. The Ministry of Culture claimed this action was necessary because English-sounding words could pose a, quote, barrier to understanding for non-gamers. This isn't the first time France has tried to ban online words for not being French enough. In the past, they've tried to ban the words email, cloud computing, and they've replaced the word hashtag with mot diez.
What does that translate to?
Hashtag, I guess. I don't know. It's mo-d with two e's dash y-e-z.
French listeners, please get a hold of us and explain why what that translation means and why they would need to do that.
It's not all bad news, however. Apparently, this ban only applies to government workers.
In the scope of their employment as government workers?
I mean, I'm
do they
guessing
is like only in official government communication?
I'm guessing if a cop arrested a gamer, then he'd have to use this language instead of a complicated word like streamer.
Keep your eye on the prize, France. That's good work.
Glad you guys are really, really taking these. That could get complicated. I mean, that's how Belgium lost the war, was because their terms for video games were too confusing. The next thing they knew, they're arguing over it. The next thing they knew, Hitler comes in and says, "This is mine." That's a situation where the whole country was in an uproar about terms around, the video games that they were playing in 1942, and then he was able to come in and exploit that. And the next thing they knew, every single person there was eating sauerkraut.
Right.
They didn't have video games.
Everybody's playing Pong or Le Pong, and next thing you know.
Early versions of video games. Like it was, of course it wasn't a game like, let's just say, Elden Ring. No, it was more simple stuff. Yes, Le Pong, La Pac-Man.
Frogger.
Frogger.
Berserk.
Which that was one that there was a whole thing about that because they're really sensitive about bringing up frogs, which is why they won't. It's illegal to talk about sloths in France.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of falling deaths in France because of their aversion to frogs.
Exactly, because they're too afraid to tape frogs to their fronts,
and that's why they're ironically sometimes called frogs.
Exactly. That's why so many of their trapeze artists. Let's just say there's no retirement plan for a trapeze artist in sunny France.
It is sunny in parts of France, I guess. The French folks may not know that. Our good French listeners may not know this, but in Texas, when we're learning about European countries and we're trying to get a scale of how big things are, they will normally say France is about the size of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Is France the size of Texas?
I think it is. Pretty close. It's not shaped the same way, Kevin, so don't try to put them on
not shaped
top
the
of
same way. That confuses a lot of people. Because they are shaped differently.
I've never known this I'm a little embarrassed to admit it.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why people call the French frogs.
My understanding is that during the German invasions of World War I and World War II, many of the French swam to Europe or took boats or, floated, and they called them frogs because
they called them slods. They called them lovelands.
I like this.
Because of their amphibious escape to freedom.
Well, I certainly don't feel good about making up a term for someone based on their flight from a tyrannical regime. So if that's the case, I'm going to remove that from the Brian Camp lexicon.
Yeah.
And once again, I find myself apologizing to the good people of France.
Quite a book.
I do think, though, like, it does make sense a little bit when you have these words that originate from a country and they're just based on that country, or they're very like otaku is like a Japanese word that means like nerd. It's like a nerd who's like into horny anime stuff, and it's very specific. But sometimes it's funny, like I'll be watching like a Japanese movie or like a Chinese movie, or I don't know, because honestly I don't watch that many French movies. I like Vincent Cassel, but I don't really know. But you'll be watching like a Japanese movie, and they'll be like talking in whatever language, and then all of a sudden there's like a very clear like English word in there. It always strikes me as real funny. Where the French Foreign Legion, it's like such a funny. It always like sticks out in such a funny way, like fuck you, Jack. What? Why do they know fuck you, Jack? And why Jack?
Well, French listeners, send us an electronique postal to let us know what's going on with your authoritarian language police.
Hopefully there will be some sort of a revolution. It's never happened before, but maybe at some point they will figure out a revolution to, I don't know, chop these words up however they want.
That's in their history. There's a good chance that if you send us an electronic postal and give us an address, you will get a drawing of your explanation sent back to you. There's a chance of that maybe on the back of an envelope.
Yes.
So don't lose this opportunity.
Yes. If you have any information from us, but you have to be French or at least of French descent.
French or French descent.
But not French American.
Or I've seen the movie Breathless.
What about the one with Richard Gere?
Only that one. Is there another one?
There's the French one.
No. That's not a French word. And we know that Breathless is not a French word. They
would never have a movie called Breathless.
They would never do that.
When you explain it that way.
Makes sense to me.
So our next story comes to us from the Daily Beast.
I'm just confused by the name of this news organization.
The Daily Beast.
Why is it? I don't like the Daily, like Catoblepus.
That's from Dungeons and Dragons.
A mind flare or a slod are also beasts.
That might be maybe the Daily Beast is a slod or a kobold.
Yeah. No, the Daily Beast is a journalistic outlet, not something made up in D&D books that you read in junior high.
But it's mostly about those creatures. And it just rotates.
Well, I do get it because sometimes when I get into beast mode, like if I've had a whole bunch of Alpha Brain Monkey mindset, I go into beast mode and I just want to sit down and write bylines. Yeah, I get it.
We've covered QAnon on the podcast before, including its impact on a skate company, the Los Angeles New Age community, a yoga and fitness website, and the QAnon claim that JFK somehow showed up at a Dallas Rolling Stones concert. But now QAnon has infected the county Utah, which is located in the state of Utah. Earlier this month, the county sheriff, who is allegedly a long-standing conspiracy theorist and QAnon supporter, released a 151-page report alleging that the Utah County attorney and his wife engaged in ritualistic child sexual abuse, child sex trafficking, and cannibalism between 1999 and 2010. The report has not been released to the public, and the sheriff claims it doesn't name anyone specifically just before he called on potential victims to come forward. Nevertheless, the county attorney has read the report and claims it does name him. He called on the sheriff to resign for wasting taxpayer funds on a fake investigation. Apparently, the report was released just after the sheriff endorsed the county attorney's rival in an upcoming primary election and just before ballots were sent out to voters. The sheriff responded that this was not political and that the investigation mainly focused on child abuse and not the consumption of children. Not really that much about cannibalism.
Well, let me ask you this: this person that's accused. Yeah. What was his role? What was his political role?
He was the county attorney, so he was the attorney that represents the county.
So this county attorney did. Let's just okay. Did he happen to be Army Hammer, who's 100% fucking cannibal?
His last name is Leave It.
Is his first name Love It?
No, it was like John or something.
It's one or the other. It's
goddamn. So this is just, I mean, obviously QAnon is just like the satanic panic, right? Like it's so like, but now I think with technology and whatnot, it's so easy to disprove. Like, well, where are the missing devoured kids? Doesn't there have to be missing kids in order for there to be murdered kids that have gone missing?
Ground their bones for broth. It's a Hansel and Gretel thing.
I mean, that's what a slod does.
Well,
the people who get into this stuff
they have a slod problem in Utah.
Aren't really the fact checker type. I mean, they just kind of get addicted to the craze of like escalating madness in this in like a story that they find very interesting and very tense and very personally relevant, since the world is burning down in this scenario.
No, I get that. That's why I got into Pokemon cards. I do understand that. But he's doing things that affect a number of people who are pay his salary and who are expecting him to do other things. This is very, I mean, this isn't like a hobby for him. Like he's like, I'm doing this to find this. Wouldn't like internal affairs or like some other like, I mean, maybe because it's in Utah, nobody cares or something, but wouldn't somebody like roll up and go, like, I feel like in Austin, if somebody was like, let's just say I'm going to spend all my time hunting the Loveland frog, when that's fucking ridiculous. The Loveland frog lives in Ohio. We all know that. There's been no okay. Loveland frog sightings. But he's like, I'm going to go around and
that would be the Austin frog.
I mean, I don't know what the name would be up for debate. It depends how the frog acts. Does he commit murders? Does he whatever?
Okay.
But like,
what would you call the murdering Austin frog?
Seymour the Slod.
Oh, beware Seymour the Slod. He lives in Barton Creek.
I hear that. He's mad about being displaced because he got kicked out of Deep Eddy.
Right.
There's some local references for you out of town folks.
You're welcome, international listeners.
So let's just say Art Acevedo.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He was a guy that would get, and he'd always get press conferences, but he does a press conference. He's just like, I think that the Loveland frog was seen on top of a whole bunch of buildings, jacking off and pissing on a Bible.
Okay, none of that is in the Loveland frog chronology up to this point.
That is what is so insane about it. And everybody's like,
right,
everybody's like, one, Loveland frog's never been seen here. Two, the Loveland frog would never do that. He keeps his sexual practices inside, and he's completely toilet trained, and he's never known to do that. So, but he's like, I'm diverting city funds to work on this.
Okay.
I mean, obviously everybody like, fuck this guy. What is he? You can't do that. That's insane. But how long does he get to keep doing that before like somebody steps in? Because I'm sure people in Ohio are like, no, that's not what's happening.
Utah.
I'm sure people are mad about this. Utah. That's what I meant.
I did look at the county attorney's like website, and it was mostly, or not website, but Facebook page. It was mostly barren, but yeah, like the few likes and comments were all about him like being a child sex trafficking cannibal.
So just photos of unmarked graves. Is that all he puts up?
The people contributing online believed it, so that could be 5 or 10% of the.
Well, I mean that's
right.
Of the voters theoretically.
Facebook. I mean that's obviously. Exactly. I mean that's Facebook. I have to think that most people. But then again, I live in an insane world that I did not design. But I would think that most people would go like, well, that's
just like Howard the Duck.
Similar.
What was Howard the Duck?
Less duck titties.
What is it? Doesn't matter.
Well, it matters to Howard. It matters to
True.
Stan Lee.
Did he create Howard the Duck?
No, Howard the Duck was created by God, I can't think of his name now. I can see his face.
Excelsior.
It doesn't matter. Val Mayrick and Steve Gerber.
I'm so glad that we have the answer to that. That's what sets us apart from all those podcasts that are still foolishly in phase 1. We're a phase 2 podcast.
Phase 2, baby.
Mm-hmm. Al Qaeda is a national or international, to our listeners, a terrorist organization that I believe is still in some level of operation. Right. That one of their characteristics is that they claim responsibility for most attacks, or they'll allow people to adopt them based on some action they've taken, and they will say, yes, that was us, whether there was any originating connection or not, right? So, and it just seems like QAnon there is so much batshit crazy stuff that falls under the QAnon umbrella that it's almost like any dumb thing that people believe automatically gets tossed in there, to where it just seems like it's almost it's synonymous for like less fun conspiracy theory is what QAnon is now. Like, is there any defining like or thread that runs through all of this other than it's just a bunch of crazy offshoots and people believing in shadow state government and the rampant adrenochrome swilling liberals?
QAnon is very extreme. I mean, and there might be other groups that are as well. And it's not the first time, because like I referenced the Satanic Panic of the 1980s as well, where this was all blamed on Satan worshipers doing very similar child trafficking, child abuse, sacrifice, etc.
In which the FBI investigated and found not one credible report of.
Which means they're in on it.
But that's what QAnon is kind of. That on top of, whatever the insane, like, we're going to get Trump's going to be back in office next week, or a lot of, and they've gone even more off the rails with all the like JFK's still alive secret type shit.
It's a weird thing to think.
It is an odd thing to think.
5G, I was going to say the whole 5G stuff, right? There's almost a logic to it, insofar as to most people that technology is mysterious, because like I couldn't tell you exactly what it is. I have a pretty good idea of how it works, and it's just it's a bandwidth or a way of carrying wireless signals on a different wave than we used to use, right? But
basically
the generating towers and everything about it, and so there's a mystery behind it, and so then I can see how people are more likely to believe that that's a crazy thing versus believing that someone without a shred of evidence first molests and then consumes children, right? Like, that's something people should understand is probably not true,
especially when there's no missing particular children,
right?
I mean, I'm sure there are missing children, but like,
sure, there's tons of missing kids, but the leap that they've all been consumed by successful politicians is, or maybe that's what made them successful. What do I know, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So two things about that. The first is that's just been part of their playbook really since 2016. Is that anybody who's your political opposition is a pedophile. And so you need to point that out. And that actually has roots that go directly to anti-Semitism for hundreds of years, that the Jews were stealing your children, sacrificing your children, selling them as sex slaves. It has direct roots to historical anti-Semitism, and it just has now been kind of applied to anybody who is othered outside of the group.
Or like that Cher song, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. That's what that's kind of about, though, right?
Yes, QAnon. Cher is very, very big in the Q community. She's a real.
It's not actually true.
A real Q head.
Because you had asked, what about the sheriff and investigating him and like kind of just getting him out of there? And the problem is that he is the highest law enforcement person within that county. So either the entire it is very hard to get people to go after him at the county level. Then the state or the federal government would have to do that because he is the authority for that county, basically. Like there's no law enforcement above him.
And this is very similar to what happened in the 1980s in Georgia in a county called Hazard.
That was the Dukes of Hazzard. That was a TV show.
But it was based on a real thing.
But based on a true story, yeah.
What was the true story?
Well, it's just a corrupt sheriff that was making all kinds, very, very hyper focused on framing these two. I mean, they're men, but they're just some boys, and they do not mean any harm.
Not at all. Good guys. The thing is, Mike, they had always been in trouble. Like their whole lives.
Yeah.
Always they've been in trouble.
Dukes of Hazzard is a TV series.
No,
yes, based on the true story.
Get this, Kevin. This sheriff was so out of control.
Uh-huh.
It's documented. Like I think they have film of this. He would actually set up speed signs that would flip up into place after these two guys had driven by. Mm-hmm. And so that's how thorough he was.
And it was all big money. It was all big money. There was these land barons that were basically funded. He was in their pocket, big time in their pocket.
Yeah. What'd they call the main guy? The guy who was funding everything? He wore the white suit. It's in all the pictures.
He was
boss.
He was.
He looked a little bit like that, but
he looked because that was the style of the time. He was CEO. He was the CEO. Hojay.
Yeah.
Hogay.
Yeah.
Boss Hogay.
Yeah. Big guy.
Oh, you mean Boss Hogg, the actor, the character.
That would.
No, this is a guy.
The dude. This was the guy.
Right.
Big, a lot of money behind him.
Well, and a lot of illegal liquor going through that county. I mean, that was look, when you're looking for corruption, that's where you're going to find it.
Exactly.
And what was so crazy about it, Kevin, is you had all this craziness happening in this one county,
Hazard County.
One county over. One county over, they had one of the most effective law enforcement officers in the entire state. Like you couldn't get away from this guy. He was so good at his job. Yeah. So it was just,
was that Enos?
It's that weird juxtaposition.
Yeah.
No, Enos, I think I think it was Chickasaw County was right next door. Is that what's
Chickasaw? This is a Glen Larson show that we can tie into later.
This is not going to be discussed in the Larsonaissance later in the episode.
Our next story is a bonus story.
Wait, I got one more thing to say about QAnon. Okay. I am little. Let's talk. I'm talking about specifically about the QAnon people in Dallas, right? They moved there. All these people.
Are they still there?
They're still in Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah. They all moved there into like a house. A lot of them have left, but a lot showed up.
Like a cult.
And then they stuck around for a while because they still think that JFK is going to come back. And I just feel
they're going out to Dealey Plaza every day waiting for him again.
Yes. I feel like that's I don't think that's going to happen. And
bold statement.
But even if it did, let's just devil's advocate say that it did. Sure. That's a lot of explaining to give to the resurrected JFK, John F. Kennedy, aka JFK. That's a lot of explaining you have to do, and QAnon people are not good at explaining things at all.
True.
You look at their posts, and it's all there's no punctuation. It's like a little kid telling a story that just goes on and on.
Right.
JFK comes back and they wander up and like, JFK, okay, there was this time that there was this president, and he was so good, and he was the best president of all, and then they made fun of him on Saturday Night Live, and then he didn't like it, and then and then he had another election, and then they said that he didn't win it, but he did, and then they didn't let him be president.
Wow.
And then he was mad, and then he said that the machines were broken, but then they didn't, and then he did, and I was wondering, now that you're here, can you make him president again? And then JFK, probably the only thing he's going to say to that is, just like, what? And they, how did you know? How did you find out about that? How did you find out about this? He's like, there was this guy Q, and he's the smartest guy in the world, and he told us all the secrets on this website called 4chan that was mostly for anime titties, he told us the truth, and he told us how to get a hold of you. And then JFK would just go, I would like to know more about the anime titties. JFK liked titties.
Oh, yeah.
How did he know what anime was?
Well, he just liked titties any way he could get them.
Okay.
He had sex with Marilyn Monroe. Did you know that?
Whoa. Breaking news.
I've heard that.
Our next story is a bonus story. So if you want to hear it,
What does that mean?
Bonus!
go to our Patreon and subscribe at least the $3 level. That's the Knights of Kevin level. And you'll have access to this and every other bonus story that we've released. And you can also, and I might send you a sticker if you're good, just for signing up.
What about the Larsonaissance?
Well, that'll come next. So
Okay, yeah. It's like, did Andy Rooney ever in the middle of 6 minutes go, well, what about my piece? we're gonna get you, Andy. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Maybe check the run of show next time.
He's holding a barbecue sandwich that just is a little short on meat. What's my thing?
So just a little taste of this. This next story will take Mike and Brian back to high school and possibly make them cry. So it's worth tuning in for that.
That sounds terrible.
I don't know if I want to cry. I'm masculine. I don't want to show vulnerability on the podcast, but
just to our Patreon
I scraped out my
subscribers.
tear ducts with a box cutter when I turned 16.
well, I guess, yeah, if it's to a Patreon subscriber, I guess I will show some vulnerability.
So what Mike and Brian are saying is you can buy their vulnerability for $3 a month. So I think it's time for Mike's Corner. What are we calling this?
We're calling this Getting to Know Your Podcast.
Ooh.
A lot of times here on the International News Service, we reference things that are not as entirely accessible as current pop culture news. So we like to carve out a little segment where I explain to you things that have come up on the podcast and give you a little bit of background on them. This month, this whole month is going to be part of the Glen Larsonaissance, in which we look at the productions of Glen A. Larson, who last week we talked about. He started the TV show Manimal, the short-lived TV show Manimal. This week we're going to talk about another short-lived show. The TV show was on the heels of the Star Wars film. The year was 1978. They needed something to really kick it off and make this space fad. So Glen A. Larson, a noted Mormon, came up with the idea of Battlestar Galactica.
Yes.
What this show is about? It's about a spaceship and these 12 groups, 12 planets known as the 12 colonies, and they're escaping. They're migrating from their ancestral world of Kobol, which is an anagram for Kolob, which is the actual place where the Mormons believe that you go after when you die. And they're flying there, and then there's these baddies. The bad guys are robots. They're robots. And they're called Cylons, and they've got one red dot for an eye that bounces back and forth. And they're actually kind of cool.
Let me ask you something real quick.
They sound super
What do their
cool.
voices sound like, and how would you simulate that when you were a child?
you would probably talking to a moving fan, I believe.
Yes.
I guarantee Mark say something that Mark can turn into a Cylon warning. He can
Okay.
Bitty bitty bitty.
That's a different.
Oh wait, that's
not this week.
Oh damn it!
Not
Sorry.
this week. But we are. You never know. We are in the Glen Larsonaissance, Mark. We are carving out.
timing.
We are carving out a segment to every day this month, every week this month about the Glen Larsonaissance. We were just talking about Battlestar Galactica, or as my former skateboard buddy would refer to it, Battlestar Prophylactica. So, Mormon-ass Glen A. Larson came up with a really kind of a ripoff of the Mormon religion. It's all an anagram for it's very like religious. It originally was going to be called Adam's Ark.
Oh, it was.
But they later settled on. So it's this show, but they had this crazy budget. It was like $8 million, which is like insane budget for a TV show back then. And it wasn't initially.
Now, kind of.
Yeah, initially it was going to be a mini series. It was going to be 3, made for TV movies. And but when the first one came out, it was so popular that we were like, well, no, we don't want miniseries anymore. We want a series.
This is on the heels of Star Wars, right?
Everybody was Star Wars crazy at the time because it did so much business. So they threw this together, and Glen A. Larson had been pitching this show for a while, and it never quite took. He mostly didn't really have too many sci-fi shows up until this point. And so this show follows, like I said, it follows a group of humans that are traveling, trying to get back to their ancestral home of Earth. The show implies that that on Earth here, that we were seeded by another planet years and years ago, and that the ancient Egyptians got this. So anyway, they're flying around, they're shooting. There's definitely chunks of Star Wars put in there. They try to make it a space western. It follows. There's the main captain of the ship is played by Lorne Greene of Bonanza fame. Then there were 2 hunky leads. There was Richard Hatch, who played Apollo, and Dirk Benedict, a.k.a. Face
from A-Team.
Faceman on the A-Team. And they were a couple of hotshot pilots. There were several different love interests. And then there was a quirky kid who they had to take care of, and his robot dog that was named Daggett. Now, here's what's interesting.
Okay.
Daggett was a robot dog, a furry robot dog. And they weren't going to dress up a dog. They had what I thought up until literally today was some sort of a human with a dog costume on. No. Daggett was a fucking chimpanzee.
What?
Dressed up as a dog.
Oh my God.
And I found pictures of the chimpanzee without the dog helmet on, and it makes so much sense when you see this dog kind of bounce around now, and its movements are very foreign and weird, which I feel like that had to break some laws.
Oh yeah.
Another interesting thing in like doing some research on this, the kid his name was Noah Hathaway, played the kid.
Oh, wow.
Who's, every show has a kid. Yeah. Kid was probably about like, I don't know, 11 years old, had a really great story being interviewed about how they let him get drunk on one episode and how he couldn't remember any lines. It was 1978. They let him have half a beer.
That's awesome.
It follows. So it's one season, and the show is doing really well, despite the fact that the first episode, like half the country didn't get to see it because they had to break in to talk about the Camp David Accords.
It's a lot, Carter.
Thanks a lot, fucking Carter. Which is a lot of people attribute to that's why he did not get reelected.
It ushered in the Reagan era,
and I think that they're right. But the fact is, they had to rush the show. They had these like things like timed out. They had to rush the show into production, and along with that, they had a whole bunch of toys and came out.
Yeah.
You know, they said they saw Star Wars. They saw what was happening with Star Wars and with the merchandising. They realized like we got to get in on this action. So they did all these toys. They had some big 12-inch figures that looked almost nothing like the characters in the show. They had some regular, like I don't know how many inches, Star Wars sized figures or whatever. Of which I had one. I had one of the green Ovions. They're like 4-armed little guys.
Oh, wow.
I think I also had the monkey dog too.
Yeah, the dog.
What they also had was spaceships, little toy spaceships. And what was cool about these spaceships is you could push a little button in the back and missiles could shoot out.
Yeah.
But then what wasn't cool is a kid shot a missile into his throat and it killed him. So it completely when this happened, this completely like changed the landscape of toys. So there used to be all kinds of little itty bitty missiles and stuff back then, but after that, they all got very big and orange and green, or just of a size that a kid can't choke on them.
The world got a little less cool that day.
Got a little less cool. So all the Galactica's killing it in the ratings. It's doing super good. So in order to combat this, they moved Archie Bunker into its spot. Archie Bunker is just like the world's most popular show at the time. Starts killing Battlestar Galactica. There was also some talk about they moved the time slot around. A lot of it, they were trying to do Mork from Ork as a lead-in for that, but so the show starts not doing very good, and it's also crazy expensive to make. It's like $1 million an episode, which is just they've got other shows that are doing as good, but they're not as expensive to make. So it's kind of becoming a loss for them because it's not killing it now. So only one season in, they announce, "Hey, we're going to cancel it." But that's not to say that the show didn't have fans. It had very many fans. There was a letter writing campaign, but what actually hurt it was there was a 15-year-old kid that was such a big fan that he committed suicide when he found out that it was, and wrote a big suicide note.
Did he do it with a missile?
How many kids died for this show?
Wrote a suicide note.
Holy shit!
Explaining why, and why this was the case, because that he felt that there was nothing in life that gave him any meaning except Battlestar Galactica. And he took his own life because of that, which that all didn't help. He tried to move the show up against 60 Minutes, and it failed in 60 Minutes because at the time, in 1980, 60 Minutes was the #1 TV show on TV. And guess why? Maybe a little guy named Mr. Mickey Rooney.
It's Andy Rooney.
Mickey was #1 in the world for a long time.
#1 in the world. The world. Battlestar Galactica, it gets moved off. Then they move some other shows against 60 Minutes and Archie Bunker, and they realize, like, I don't know. It's not that the show's bad. It's that nobody can go up against these shows. Let's give it another shot. But by the time, this is like a couple years later, they decide to make a TV show called Battlestar Galactica 1980. And what that show is, they finally get to Earth, right? And then they realize, like, oh shit, we're all in like 1980 stuff here. This is not good. So it follows a new group of characters, although Lauren Green reprised his role, but nobody else did. Okay. And it flopped really, really, really fucking hard. That being said, Battlestar Galactica, there's a reboot of the series in the 2000s that was very popular. That was pretty different. That is probably one of the biggest marks that Glen A. Larson made. Despite only lasting one season, it has massive staying power. It is here to stay. Mm-hmm. It caused the deaths of several children. Can you say that about your favorite TV show, dear listeners? And that is Get to Know Your Podcast Better. So if we bring up Battlestar Galactica, now you'll know what we're talking about. And I think we will.
Have we ever brought up Battlestar Galactica?
Well, we brought up Glen A. Larson. How can we bring up Glen A. Larson without his most iconic creation, And we've also talked about monkeys. And I think at some point, stuffing a monkey into a robot dog suit is going to become prescient.
And be prepared to answer the question, Kevin. Anytime you ever mention a dead child, there will be a question about the manner of death being toy missile. So
Toy missile.
or bereavement over the loss of your favorite TV show.
Yes, or premature cancellation.
You died of a broken heart.
Back to you, Kevin.
So that wraps up another week of the International News Service. Find us across social media at International News Pod. Email us at internationalnewspod@gmail.com. The INS team hereby grants the right to every chapel in Las Vegas to perform INS-themed weddings whenever the fuck they want. Check out the INS merch store at Redbubble and our Patreon. We'll see you next week.
Starbuck rules.
Thank you for listening to the International News Service. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. INS, the news you need.